Hi, everybody. Thanks for being patient with us. Thank you for joining the Arbor Day Foundation for our second webinar in our summer series, Nature-Based Pathways to Stable Climate. My name is Megan Rice, and I'll be serving as moderator. Some of you may be joining us for the second time this summer, while others are tuning in for the very first time. We appreciate your interest in learning more about trees as a natural climate solution. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the box provided in your GoToWebinar control panel. We have reserved the final 10 minutes of our time together to answer any questions you may have. I'd now like to introduce you to my colleague, Jeremy Mannion, who will be leading our discussion today. Jeremy leads the Arbor Day Foundation's Forestry Carbon Market and Natural Climate Solutions program by using forest restoration, protection, and improved management as a solution to complex local and global issues. Jeremy, take it from here.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Wanted to just kind of set a quick agenda for what we'll be talking about. Three topics: the current state of the climate emergency that's happening globally, and nature's essential role in the response. Secondly, would be Arbor Day and our role in the natural climate solution space. And then the final thing I want to talk about is how, now is the time for trees, and now is the time to raise ambition in a global response to climate change. And so, with the Arbor Day Foundation, we use the carbon markets. Our vision is to be a leader in creating worldwide recognition of the use of trees to solve complex local and global issues. And there's not many more issues right now that are pressing than climate change. This is a kind of the current trend of where global greenhouse emissions are by type, and across energy, across land use, across other gases like methane. Right now, we're emitting close to 55 billion tons of carbon a year. And within this overall slide right here, I want to unpack a few things real quick. So one thing is, we put the focus so much on emissions from oil and gas and, other fuels that we use, other fossil fuels that we use. I think one thing that's important to recognize is that land, in particular, forestry, agriculture, and land use change collectively are about 25% of global emissions. And that's concerning because the land and natural systems, forests, the oceans, wetlands, grasslands, those should be absorbing carbon. And so it just shows how stressed our land systems are that these are actually emitting carbon. And so we want to talk about some ways to reverse these trends. And, the broader trend right now that we're seeing is here is quite compelling. So the Earth has naturally managed carbon over the course, since the beginning of time. And, that's our forests, our oceans, our grasslands, they're all emitting carbon and then removing it. And so it's really showing that, it's human behavior starting around, the Industrial Revolution, really expediting after the World War II. That we see this massive increase here, and where we're actually, it's our behavior that's causing these issues, and we can identify it's our behavior by the types of, we can basically identify the carbon molecules in the air to back to sources like aviation fuels from cars, and so it's just the fact that it's our behavior changing the way the atmosphere is being regulated. And so these have very real impacts on people and all other forms of life. And so whether it's flooding during hurricanes or heavy rain seasons, whether it's more intense forest fires, whether it's water scarcity, agricultural issues, these issues have always existed, but we're seeing the intensity and the frequency of these events get more intense over time. And so, what we're looking to do is look at a more comprehensive solution here. And so I think so much of the focus gets put on clean energy, renewables from solar and wind and electric vehicles, and those are a critical part of the total solution as well. but it's not the only thing. Where we're at right now with about 55 billion tons of carbon, the goal to basically keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius as aligned to the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to cut emissions in half by 2030, which equates to about 30 billion metric tons of carbon. And we need to keep avoiding emissions by this transition to clean energy future, but we also need to recognize that nature has an essential role to play here too. And so our friends at the Nature Conservancy and the National Academy of Sciences and other thought leaders in this space have really kind of put together a very nice little high-level graphic of what nature's potential is by 2030. And in total, it's about 11 billion tons of carbon that nature can help us remove across forest, agriculture, and wetlands. And they're kind of divided into three main buckets of protection, management of working lands, and then restoration of the lands we've already degraded. And so forests in particular are about 2/3 of this pathway with 7 billion tons of carbon. And so we're really excited about this potential. And I want to take some time to go into these numbers just a little bit deeper. And so with, this is a summary of the top 20 natural climate solutions globally of how to get to that 11 billion tons in total. And so when we look at the top three here, reforestation, not converting forests to other things like agriculture, improving how we manage our existing forests, these top three solutions that have the most potential are also the three types of forestry carbon credits that are available in the marketplace today. And so, reforestation in particular has the most potential. That's a part of the market that we get really excited about at Arbor Day because it has the most potential, but it's getting the least amount of investment from either the public or the private sector. And so, we want to kind of help, raise more awareness on the reforestation and restoration front, in addition to also building portfolios that include, avoided conversion and improved management as well. And then I think one thing to close on this slide is, trees will play a role in other areas of agriculture and wetland restoration too. Things like mangroves, restoring mangroves globally. So these are areas that we want to continue to watch for, to look at other, market-based solutions in the future that can be developed for these top 20 solutions. Here's a quick history of the voluntary carbon market. And so the darker green is the amount of tons that have been issued through the major registries, the four major carbon registries, Verified Carbon Standard, American Carbon Registry, Climate Action Reserve, and Gold Standard. And so you can see over the last 10 years, we've had a steady increase in production of supply, reaching in 2017 the most tons issued with 62.7 million tons. And then the lighter green you'll see too is the tons retired. And so that's basically once a metric ton of carbon is retired, no one else can claim that verified emissions reduction again. And so what we're seeing is that gap between tons issued and tons retired shrinking, which is promising. It's showing that there's demand for these products. It's showing that organizations are using these to actually, truly reduce their emissions moving forward, in addition to other efforts like becoming more responsible with how they procure energy. And so the compliance markets have seen good success to date, but in total, they've helped absorb about 500 million tons of carbon, which sounds like a lot, but that's about 4 or 5 days worth of global emissions. And so the promising piece is there's a lot of innovation that's happening in the carbon markets, a lot of ways to engage farmers, a lot of interesting ways to improve biodiversity. And so the current state of that market is about $190 million voluntary market. But then if you look at the compliance markets, currently about 40% of global gross domestic product falls under some type of compliance market. And these markets tend to focus more on energy, reducing methane from landfills, other things like this in that space. And nature is kind of neglected in these global compliance markets, which is something that we're working to try to change with some of our partners, because we can really start unlocking more scale in forestry if we're able to get forestry outside of the voluntary market into the compliance market. And so that'll be an effort over the course of the next coming years that we'll be sure to keep everyone updated about. And so we've seen a lot of information, a lot of studies come out over the course of the last couple of years talking about, the essential need of nature in helping us with this climate response and helping us improve the lives for our communities and our families. And so, we recognize that, now's the time for trees. We can't wait any longer to restore the planet and the natural systems that support life. And so the Arbor Day with our partners has launched an initiative called the Time for Trees, which I'll go into a little bit more here later. But what we're wanting to do is really just continue the work we've been doing for the last almost 50 years. And, it's our mission to inspire people to plant, nurture, and celebrate trees. And what we've been doing, more for the carbon markets is the foundation utilizes these carbon markets as a social enterprise to generate revenue that drives our mission and vision forward. And so by partnering with the foundation to make these investments into nature and into forestry carbon credits, our corporate partners are not only, reducing their emissions, but they're also indirectly advancing the foundation's broader work in urban forestry and natural forest restoration and disaster recovery and our education and recognition programs. And what we've been really doing, like I mentioned earlier, was really focusing in on our specialties, been helping project developers scale up their restoration and their reforestation projects. But additionally, we like to partner with others in the space, like Natural Capital Partners and some others that I'll talk about here a little later, to craft complete forestry carbon portfolios that not only focus on restoration, but also protection and improved management, because we need all three to have healthy forests globally. And so what we've also done in the space as a trusted nonprofit, we're also, working with the true industry leaders in the space. IATA, the International Emissions Trading Association, has kind of been leading work in the global compliance and voluntary markets for the last 20 years. There's a working group within IATA called ICROA, the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance, that has a code of best practice that the practitioners in this space stick to basically create trust and to ensure that we're sticking to the highest quality and integrity standards in the space. And some of those standards are focused on making sure that these projects are measurable, that they're real, that they're permanent, that they're additional in the sense that these projects wouldn't be happening without these investments coming from the private sector. They're independently verified and they're unique. And one of the things that gets me most excited about the work that IATA and ICROA are doing in this space is we're working to try to get business to think beyond a business as usual mindset. And so we're trying to raise ambition, because as the trends show, we're not on track to solve the problem of climate. It's only getting worse and we're running out of time. And so we're really trying to mobilize and increase ambition to address this issue. And I think the way that we've found some interesting messaging that has been a way to connect with our partners on a fairly complex topic has been thinking about this in terms of climate offense and defense. And what that really means is, I think if you look at our emission, even if we stopped emitting carbon and other greenhouse gases today, we still have a major problem. The climate will continue to warm because there's over 1 trillion tons of excess carbon and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And so what we ultimately have to do is not only stop emitting emissions, but we have to start removing that excess carbon. And the most cost-effective, scalable, immediately accessible way to do that is with forestry and with nature. And in particular, restoration. There's a lot of degraded land globally. And what we're doing is working with our partners in the reforestation and agroforestry space using these internationally recognized standards of the American Carbon Registry, things like VCS, to really show that this can be a viable model, not only for producers in this space and getting emissions reductions, but finding different ways to engage private landowners here in the U.S. and smallholder farmers around the world. There's over 500 million smallholder farmers globally, and they want to find ways to manage their land more holistically as well. And so we're working with some really high quality partners in this space to be able to do that. And then we're also constantly looking at the innovators in the space, some of the more newcomers that are coming in to try to drive, further innovation. And so we have some friends at organizations like Biocarbon Engineering and Land Life that are really finding new ways to use technology, things like drones and robots to plant trees in hard to plant areas like mines and mangroves. City forest credits and Plan Vivo are two emerging registries and standards that are focusing on city forest credits in particular is focusing on the urban space and the need for urban restoration and ways to verify carbon, energy savings, and stormwater on top of that. Plan Vivo is really focusing on finding new ways to engage people and providing better social outcomes in these types of projects. And so we're excited about the idea that we can go on offense and start drawing down carbon through restoration efforts. And some examples of some projects we have are here in the Mississippi River Valley in the U.S. This is probably our most strategic partnership at Arbor Day. We've worked with Green Trees for close to 10 years now and have really helped them scale their project to be the largest voluntary carbon market project for reforestation, generating about a third of all global credits for reforestation, and about 99% of the ones produced domestically here in the U.S. Then our friends at EcoTierra are working with shade-grown agroforestry systems in Peru. So in addition to the restoration efforts of hillsides, like you see in the lower left-hand corner, growing coffee and cacao under the forest canopy and finding ways to establish infrastructure to help these smallholder farmers in Peru and throughout Latin America access high-quality, fair trade, organic markets for their commodities like cocoa and coffee, while also producing carbon credits. And so we're having multiple income streams, which ultimately de-risk the project, both for the investors and for the landowners in the long term. Then our friends on, we need offense and we need defense. Our friends in the forest protection and management space, a few of them are highlighted here. And I think what I'll focus on right now is the UN REDD program, reducing emissions from deforestation and land degradation globally. And this program's been going for about 10 years now. And unfortunately, we're still losing more forest. Deforestation has not slowed quite yet. We're seeing some positives happening, though, throughout the world, and that's what I want to focus on, are some of these positive things that are happening right now and what we need to do to lay the infrastructure for actually reversing this trend. And so our friends at IATA kind of did a study last year showing that to slow deforestation and to help improve land use outcomes globally, we need about $200 billion in investment flowing into forestry and agriculture. And right now we have about $1 billion. And so we're 0.5% there. But I think with the combined efforts that we're seeing, related to the Paris Agreement, I think we're laying a lot of the hard infrastructure now to eventually get there. We're seeing companies recognize this, especially companies in the food and beverage industry, companies in the aviation sector, companies in these heavy emitting industries like maritime as well, and the need to have nature be a bridge to a low carbon future as they're actually decarbonizing their core business. And so another project to highlight here in Peru is our friends at Ecosphere Plus. And the really important piece, this is a piece of forest that's in the Amazon basin. And I think the highlight here is that our friends at Ecosphere Plus has worked very closely with the Peruvian government to track the carbon emissions reduced and avoided through their project, their forestry project, and then working with the government to make sure that if there is an investor that is claiming these credits for their own emissions reductions, that they're deducting those from Peru's national forest inventory related to their Paris climate commitments, because we don't want double counting there. And that's going to be an ongoing issue that will be resolved related to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement throughout the course of this year, and probably moving into, we're hoping that will be resolved by COP25 in December in Chile. And that'll just be very critical to make sure there's trust and integrity in these markets. And the solutions are very simple and straightforward. But we need, simple things like a universal global accounting system to make sure that you're actually getting towards that 30 billion tons of reductions by 2030 and scaling up past that moving forward. Our friends at Natural Capital Partners are doing some very high quality work in Indonesia, helping communities that live in and around these forests get access to more stable income, food security, healthcare, education, and then also protecting, endangered species like orangutans. And then going beyond just the carbon credits, finding ways to help restore the island of Borneo's coastal forest by basically adding on mangrove seedlings on top of carbon credit investments. And mangroves are very powerful not only for removing carbon from the atmosphere, but for resiliency, reducing floods during storm surges. They're also hotspots for biodiversity, birds, fish, shrimp. We want to make sure that mangrove forests are healthy around the world too. And so, again, if ever there were a time for trees, now is that time. And, Arbor Day launched into this initiative, back in March, and it's our goal to plant 100 million trees and engage 5 million tree planters by 2022, which is our 50th anniversary of the foundation and our 150th anniversary of the Arbor Day holiday. And 100 million trees sounds like a lot, but it's just kind of a down payment on the future. And this is just the start of much bigger things to come that we're really excited about. And this couldn't be possible without our partners with what we've recognized as the Evergreen Alliance. And, I think another thing that gets us excited about this space is being able to, not only help each one of these individual companies hit their goals, but how can we start collaborating together to drive more investments to get up from that $1 billion of investment in nature to closer to that $200 billion investment in nature? And I think we're seeing companies like the ones you see on this slide already investing in things like renewable energy together. And so, we're working to see if we can copy similar initiatives into investments into nature. And, and additionally, we recognize the need to provide simple frameworks to guide these investments. And so we're going to be having some more stuff roll out here over the course of this fall. Arbor Day will, but I just wanted to recognize our friends at PwC for some of their principles in guiding investments into nature-based solutions and carbon credits. That's shown here on the slide. And then just wanted to finally close here with, talking about that, this is a kind of a big, dire issue. And it seems like, what can we reverse this trend? Is this something we can truly solve? I'm very hopeful, mainly because we have basically scientists showing that we have all the solutions that we need right now to solve this problem. There's a framework called Project Drawdown that shows 80 existing technologies and 20 emerging technologies that can basically allow us to stop emitting carbon and remove that trillion tons of excess carbon in the atmosphere. It's just a matter of having the political will to do it. And so we want to make sure that we recognize that there are solutions. This can be done, but we do have a shrinking time, finance gap to address this. And so we want to make sure that we do what we can to find ways to raise ambition as a global climate response, and then recognize that nature is a central part of that solution. And so thank you for the time today. And we might be a little short on time for some questions, but we have a few minutes left. We'll take some, and then feel free to follow up with me afterwards too. So thank you very much.